morning and welcome to Business Morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. Well, the National Bureau of Statistics has just released the inflation figure for the month of November, and the data shows that inflation increased to 11.28%. That's year on year in the month. This is 0.02% point higher than the rate recorded in October 2018. Now, on month basis, the headline index increased by 0.80% in November, up by 0.06 percentage points from the rate recorded in October. The percentage change in the average composite CPI for the 12 months period ending November over the average of the CPI for the previous 12 months was 12.41%, showing 0.37% point decline from 12.78% recorded in October 2018. And let's look at the urban inflation there. What does it say? The urban inflation increased to 11.61% as year on year in November from 11.64% recorded in October, while the rural inflation rate increased to 10.99% in November from 10.93% in October. The composite food index rose to 13.30% in November compared to 13.28% in October. The data shows that the rise in the food index was caused by increases in prices of bread and cereals, milk, cheese and egg, fish, vegetables, fruits, oil and fats, potatoes, yam, and other tubers. On a month-on-month basis, the food index sub-index increased to 0.90% in November 2018, up by 0.08 percentage points from 0.82% recorded in October. The average annual rate of change of the food sub-index for the 12-month period ended November 2018 over the previous 12-month average was 14.80%. That's 0.56 percentage lower from the average annual rate of change recorded in October. Well, that's what the data says for the November inflation. Still on data, the National Bureau of Statistics reports that Nigerian banks' non-performing loans stood at 2.245 trillion naira as of the end of September 2018. According to the data, in the period under review, the country's gross loans stood at 15.861 trillion naira, while loans that's after specific provisions stood at 13.332 trillion naira. The data shows that as of the end of June, non-performing loans stood at 1.939 trillion naira, while gross loans and loans after specific provisions were 15.50 trillion naira and 13.587 trillion naira each. In October, AMCON published a list of defaulters that it termed as delinquent debtors. They allegedly owed about 906.1 billion naira. In the meantime, the Central Bank of Nigeria is planning to introduce a new mechanism called the Global Standing Instruction that will work with the bank verification number of depositors to detect bad borrowers who refuse to pay their loans but plan to take another loan from other suspecting banks. The regulator plans to introduce this mechanism in 2019. According to the Apex Bank, the GSI will bring out the credit history of any debtor who plans to borrow from any bank, and all Nigerian banks will be provided such information. The mechanism will make it impossible for any borrower to get another loan from another bank without first repaying all outstanding loans. In its 2017 annual activity report, the CBN said that as at the end of December 2017, the implementation of the BVN project recorded 31.4 million registered BVNs and 43.9 accounts linked with BVNs out of 66.9 active members. A Nigeria Content Development Fund, the Nigerian Content Development Fund and Monitoring Board and the Bank of Industry had in August 2017 launched a $200 million Nigerian Content Intervention Fund. The pool of funds is to provide loans to Nigerian companies involved in manufacturing in the oil and gas industry, as well as firms seeking to acquire assets, especially rigs and marine vessels. Beneficiaries will get a maximum of $10 million repayable after 5 years at 8% interest rate. But what level of implementation has been achieved so far, 1 year after? I'm being joined by the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, Engineer Simbi Wabote, from our Abuja studios. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Wabote.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, I know it's been a year since the launch of the Nigerian Content Intervention Fund. First, bring us up to speed on the whole idea of coming up with such initiative.
Yeah, thanks again. Once again, thank you for having me. I think the whole idea of this initiative stems from the fact that Nigerian businesses that want to do business in the oil and gas sector are faced with some challenges. Challenges such as infrastructure, power, challenges such as funding. And we believe in NCDMB we should be able to tackle the funding challenge. Part of it is that Nigerian content, it's not only about monitoring, it's also about developing local businesses to provide services to the oil and gas industry within the acceptable standard. So we have this fund, which is pooled together by the contractors who work in the oil and gas sector. And the intent of that fund is to help to develop their capacity. So we did establish this NCIF to be able to give loan access to the contributors to the fund at a single-digit interest rate, because we discovered that competing with international companies that deal with single-digit borrowing interest rate, as well as in some instances no interest at all, it's very difficult if you don't provide that platform for the Nigerian companies. So we established these funds to support them, and they are the contributors to this fund. And we believe with the 8% interest rate and 5-year payback period, we will be able to tackle one of the key challenges that have bedeviled Nigerian businesses in providing service to the oil and gas sector.
Now, it's a year after the launch of this initiative. What is the level of implementation so far? How much have you been able to achieve in your aim?
Yes, I think, like you know, I just read in the papers, and I heard you this morning when you talked about the number of failed loans in the various banks. One of the criteria we utilize to select Bank of Industry as the partner to work with regards to management of this fund is to look at the trend of failures in terms of payback of loans. And because of that process, the Bank of Industry and NCDMB established a very rigorous screening process to ensure that those who benefit from the loan use the loan to provide services for the oil and gas sector. That way, it is easier to pay back. As of today, we have disbursed about $21 million. And as I speak, between now and end of Q1 2019, based on the number of applications that are being reviewed by the Bank of Industry and ourselves, I guess that fund will be exhausted in no time. And the other challenge behind Bank of Industry is that they are trying everything they can to also seek for counterpart funding. So the whole idea is that we'll continue to grow that fund to support and work with Nigerian businesses. So the implementation process and the application process has been seamless, and I believe that we just needed time to do proper screening and ensure that beneficiaries deliver value to the oil and gas industry, and we have a line of sight on how they pay back this money.
Now, beneficiaries will get a maximum of $10 million repayable after 5 years at 8% interest rate, as you said. Now, when this initiative came on board, applicants faced some kind of challenges accessing the funds because of some stiff conditions put in place. Perhaps that has to do with the collateral, the mode of collateral. How have you been able to resolve some of these issues?
Thank you very much for that question. One of the key strengths of NCDMB is always to review every situation and to see what are the obstacles and bottlenecks. Perhaps the same way efficient oil and gas industry run their business. So we took stock 3 months ago as to know why it's not been going smoothly. And we had about 200 stakeholders who attended that session with the Bank of Industry to hear from them what their challenges are. Some of it has to do with collateral. Some of it had to do with some of the documentations that are demanded by Bank of Industry. So we were able to streamline that process. We were able to also create an opportunity for these people to also produce bonds from reputable insurance companies to back up their loan application such that increases. But don't forget, one of the things we also found out is that most of the applicants to this loan were highly leveraged to some of the commercial banks. So it was difficult for the commercial banks to give them collateral in order to borrow from the fund. And we also discovered that almost 70% of the applicants have running loans already with the banks. So we then decided with the council, governing council of the board, to increase the loan refinancing from $2 million to $10 million. Based on that, we have seen significant movement in terms of the application process as I speak.
Now, 1 year down the line, do you think this initiative has made an impact in the oil and gas sector?
Oh, significant impact. As a matter of fact, it's brought back confidence with the main operators to be sure that most of the Nigerian companies who have opportunity to gain the contracts will have access to funding. They also come to talk to us to verify some of these companies, and most of them are in the process of acquiring new equipment. And I think the beauty of this is that because we have a line of sight to the contracts with which they want to borrow money on, it is then very easy for us to track and ensure that these loans are paid back. We've seen significant activities, but I think one of the greatest challenge, it's about the funnel of opportunity in the oil and gas sector, because, for instance, we just completed the Egina project, and we have developed significant capacity in the industry. And the big question out there is that where is the next big project? If these projects continue to come back to back, then be rest assured that the impact will be much, much more than what we have currently.
And how many beneficiaries have signed up so far, and what areas in the sector are they operating?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
How many beneficiaries have signed up so far?
Oh, as I speak, you have almost about 86 applicants. About 4 or 5 of them have succeeded in accessing the funds. And when I took stock with Bank of Industry, the number of applicants far outweigh the amount of money that we have. Hence, the challenge back to them to ensure that they source for counterpart funding so that we can match the demand for it. But I can assure you there are very significant signs out there in 2019, an up-peak of oil and gas activities. And this in itself will reflect on those wanting to access the fund to execute those projects. And don't forget, we also developed a 10-year strategic roadmap. And the intent is that within the next 10 years, we are going to create 300,000 jobs if we realize those funnel of opportunities that we have as a board. So I think we have our eyes on the ball. We are focused. We have quarterly reviews on progress of our plans, of the funding mechanism. And I'm sure if you ask my friends in the Bank of Industry, the rigor with which we go through with them to ensure that the contributors to these funds are beneficiaries to it, they will give you that feedback.
Well, Mr. Wabote, we don't really have more time, but a quick one just before I let you go. Now, the initiative has run for 1 year. What next is on your agenda? A quick one.
Oh, Good question. I think what we said when we started was, first of all, create this opportunity for contributors to the fund. In 2019, we have big plans to realize the present administration's focus and objective in exploring the potentials within the oil and gas value chain. So in 2019, we will play very much within the downstream sector, okay, to ensuring that we implement the 7 big win that was launched by the president in terms of LPG penetration in all parts of the country.
All right, Ms.
In terms of manufacturing of LPG cylinders, as well as expanding our coast in terms of modular refineries. So these are big things we want to pursue.
We would have to leave this conversation here. I'm sure we would have more room to discuss this issue. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Simbi Wabuti, the Executive Secretary, Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk commodities with a focus on salt production in Nigeria. Do stay with us.